Hello gamers, today I'm going to be talking about Dishonored, the 2012 game made by Arcane Studios and published by the one and only Lord Howard. Dishonored was a game I remember very fondly, playing it on the Xbox 360 and completing it multiple times to experience both the low and high chaos endings of the game. If I'm remembering correctly, it was even a game for free with Xbox Gold, and that's how I got it, if I'm remembering that correctly. Dishonored being a game with a very unique art style and setting, the art direction being led by Victor Antonov, who got his start on the hit game Redneck Rampage, but is most likely more known for his work on Half-Life 2. And what an amazing art design this game has, with what I would say was very unique at the time, and also holds up very well for a game of its age. And although the art style jumps out at you right away, it's not one that I would consider a quote-unquote beautiful game. But I also feel that's the point. The game doesn't take place in a beautiful time, with the fictional city of Dunwall being a Victorian era city being infected by the plague. But of course, even though most of the city looks like a pile of trash and is infested with piles of trash, there is still beauty in the towers and castles of the royalty and the elites, which the art ties both together very well, being able to capture the decay of the poor infected parts of the town, but still being able to capture the gold and white marble elegance of the elite. But Dishonored isn't just known for its art style, and isn't even mainly known for it, as back in 2012, when most narrative games were for the most part an on-rails adventure, the team at Arcane introduced choice into its players' lives, not in the way that Life is Strange does it, but for giving you multiple ways to complete an objective, this game's stealth being a highlight aided by supernatural powers like Blink. At the same time as the game being one of the more unique stealth games I have played since the social stealth in AC1, there is also the option to play the game without using stealth once. Just run through, guns blazing and grenades booming, using the game's supernatural powers to become the world's best super soldier. All of these approaches will also affect how the games play in future missions. If you go towards a higher chaos run, the City Watch react to your actions, adding increased security around the city of Dunwall, making each following mission that little bit harder. On the other side of the spectrum, a low chaos run, you will have an easier time getting around, and there is also options where you don't even have to get your own hands dirty getting someone else to kill or capture your targets. But we'll get to that a little bit more in the story. But before then, it's time to take a look at Dunwall itself, as a city can say a lot just on its own. So Dunwall is the capital city of the Empire of the Isles and home to Empress Jasmina Coldwin, who lives in Dunwall Tower looking over the capital city, a city that has a deep history, a city that is powered by whales, both from its rich whaling sector, and as going along the river you will see boats carrying whole whale carcasses, which impressive feat of engineering, that is. Love to know how they get the whale up there, but that's not important. And also, the whales are used as a form of power itself, energy for the kingdom, coming from whale oil, which has seemingly given this kingdom a jump in technology, as even though the game takes place in 1837, it has the tech of at least a 19th century city, with some tech even better than ours, leading more towards the mystical. And the city is in the middle of the rips of the plague, aka the Black Death. which has led to large sections of the city being abandoned or locked down to keep the plague victims isolated, especially a section of the city referred to as the Flooded District, as an area that had become so run down that it's just been walled off from the rest of the city, with hired guns ruling the area, as the rich wall themselves off from all the problems of the lesser people and party away like nothing is happening, even though the plague doesn't really care for your wealth or position in society. And it just reminds me of how good plague games can be when your biggest enemy isn't the people trying to kill you, but the rats trying to infect you. Well, not trying, but you know what I mean. Now, it doesn't capture that same fear around rats that A Plague Tale Innocence does. And that's due to the game's supernatural powers, giving you a step up on the competition, aka the rats. The supernatural runs strong in Dunwall, as it turns out Dunwall is built on the ruins of an ancient, long forgotten city that worshipped a magical entity known as the Outsider, a man or godlike figure that lives in the void. The previous city leaving a bunch of bone charms around Dunwall, which can be used to gain some buffs like increased lung capacity or reduced damage taken, stuff like that. But not to get more magical powers, as they can be gained by using ancient runes, which you can also find around the city, left behind from the people before. But the real question is, how do you get these supernatural gifts? Well, Corvo, the character you play as, is visited by the Outsider, who seems to be some immortal being who watches humans for fun. The ones that the Outsider deems enjoyable enough gets imbound with the mark of the Outsider, gaining access to a bunch of supernatural powers, those being Blink, which is a short-range teleport which allows you to get some awesome assassinations, and is probably the feature that the game is most well known for. Next up is Dark Vision. Basically this game's version of Eagle Vision, allowing Corvo to see enemies and other helpful things through walls, floors, roofs. You get the idea. Devouring Swarm may be the coolest sounding of the powers, letting you summon a horde of plague rats which will attack, kill, then eat the body of your foes, leaving nothing to be found. And possibly the easiest to guess from its name would be the skill of Possession, which allows you to possess small animals at the first level and once upgraded to control humans for a brief period of time. And the final power gifted to Corvo from the Outsider is that of Bend Time, which allows Corvo to entirely slow or freeze time, allowing him to either sneak past the city watch or unleash hell on them before they can even respond. And the reason I'm talking about the Outsider, well, outside of the story section, is because the Outsider isn't really a part of the story. Apart from giving Corvo his powers, the Outsider can show up when Corvo finds a shrine to the Outsider built by the citizens of Dunwall, although worshipping the Outsider is not allowed under government law. And the Outsider appears to give Corvo some information, but never super helpful to the mission. Seemingly lets onto the fact that the Outsider can see events that don't happen or haven't happened yet, or there's a possibility of them happening, much like Doctor Strange. Maybe the DLC explains more about the Outsider, or what does the Outsider do? Stuff like that. Or maybe the Outsider is just more of a god figure watching for his own amusement and wanting to be worshipped. But it would seem understanding the Outsider is just beyond my scope. But do you know what isn't? Weapons! Of course, this game has plenty depending on which playstyle you are going for. With a high chaos player, you are more likely to use weapons like the pistol, paired with grenades and spring razors. A selection of very loud weapons, with a pistol being, well, a gun that shoots big loud bullets into the faces of your opponents. and is very good at getting you out of some situations where you are surrounded by the City Watch. On the other hand, grenades are very good for getting rid of large groupings of the City Watch that you are not in the middle of. Now maybe for something you're probably less familiar with, that being spring razors, which are basically like claymores or proximity mines that Corvo can leave around for unexpected guards. Once being triggered, sending blades flying in all directions, leaving a mess of bodies for other guards to find. Not counting the loud noises attached to the triggering of the machine as well. And then finally, for high chaos runs, there is the option to use whale oil canisters. Now yes, these power all the tech in the city, but they can also be thrown at your foes, and much like nades, blowing up in a loud fiery explosion of death and fire. But maybe drawing all this attention to yourself isn't really your playstyle. There are some more quiet weapons for us to use, starting with the crossbow, still lethal, but a lot more quiet than the pistol. Crossbow even has two modes, lethal and non-lethal, with the ability to fire off sleeping darts, as you can also play the game trying not to kill anybody. But apart from the crossbow, the stealthy people have a little bit less in their arsenal, with only other tool to help them being that of the rewire gadget, which allows Corvo to rewire some of the City Watch's defenses, turning them against the City Watch. And of course, all of these weapons and gadgets are paired alongside Corvo's most famous weapon, his sword with the retractable blade, which can be used in both a silent assassin way or going into a massive sword fight with the City Watch sort of way. But now it is finally time to talk about my favourite part of the game, and that is of course the story, which with the awesome setting, there are some pretty good story ideas you could visit, so let's get right into the one they chose. So the game opens with Corvo, a somewhat silent, somewhat mute protagonist, returning to Dunwall on a boat after the Empress Jasmina had sent him around the Isles to talk to a bunch of other cities to see if they had any interactions and possibly even a cure for the plague that is currently knocking on the city's door. As Corvo arrives back to Dunwall Tower, he is greeted by Emily Caldwin, the daughter of the Empress, as they play a quick little game of hide and seek, after which Corvo returns to his Empress to deliver the news. But as Corvo is reunited with the Empress, of which he is her personal bodyguard, some glitchy, teleporty assassins show up to take out the Empress whilst kidnapping Emily and leaving Corvo on the floor as the guards show up, and the spy master is very quick to blame Corvo.
Ward us all, look at what he's done.
Yes, he's killed the Empress. What did you do with young Lady Emily, traitor?
Her own bodyguard. Ironic.
I'll see you beheaded for this, Corvo. Take him.
And have him arrested and sent to jail awaiting execution for the assassination of Jasmina and the kidnapping of Emily. While Corvo is in his cell, he receives a note from an unknown party who also give him a key to escape his cell, then feeding him instructions on how to escape the prison, heading into a sewer until meeting up with boatsman Samuel, who gives Corvo a ride to the Hound's Pit pub, the hideout of the people who planned Corvo's escape. They call themselves the Loyalists, loyal to Emily and the true throne of the Caldwin bloodline. An interesting name, as you'll find out as we go on in the story, but they are looking to find and return Emily to the throne, as the old spy master has named himself Lord Regent and is ruling over Dunwall with an iron fist. The leaders of the Loyalists being Admiral Havelock and Lord Trevor Pembleton, and after greeting Corvo, he is shown to a room and gets to sleep for the night, which is where we first enter the Void Realm and meet the Outsider. After awakening from his slumber, Corvo is introduced to the main members of the team, most importantly being the before mentioned boatman Samuel, as he will be taking us to each location and returning us to the Hound's Pit pub if all goes well. And Piero, I've definitely pronounced that wrong, I am sorry, an inventor who will help upgrade Corvo's gear and who also produces his mask to hide his identity, which I have to say, pretty cool looking mask. But after meeting them, it is time to meet Corvo's first target, that being High Overseer Thaddeus Campbell, who was a part of the plan to kill the Empress and point the finger at Corvo. He is also in control of the Overseers, a cult-like group of people who use music to stop magic, which works. I don't know how, but it just kind of works. But first, before we can take him out, we have to save someone by the name of Overseer Martin, who was a part of the Loyalists, and after saving him and freeing him from his binds, we finally get to the point where we get to kill the High Overseer in a bit of a confusing thing. This was my first time playing the game in a couple of years. I got a bit confused and I actually left this mission with a high chaos rating. But that changes for the rest of the game. I learn, I promise. As we return to the pub, but we are not at the pub for long as there is no rest for the wicked. And some information from the High Overseer's journal has given us the location of Emily. She is being held at the Golden Cat, an up-class elite brothel ran by Lord Pembleton's brothers, who he has also requested that we kill for him. And there are many ways we can go about completing this task, as is a part of the game's many different approaches, as I ended up being a local criminal, Slackjaw, the leader of the Bottle Street gang, who agreed to get rid of the Pembleton brothers for me if I gave him the code to a safe of a local art broker's apartment, the art broker himself hiding out at the Golden Cat. So I meet up with him in a compromising position as he gives Corvo his safe codes, and then Corvo finds Emily in one of the rooms upstairs, and after helping her, she reveals a secret escape route. As we quickly fetch a key for the door at the end of the route, we get Emily to freedom. But Corvo isn't quite done yet, as he returns to the art dealer's apartment to make sure the safe code works and everything. And after seeing that the code works, maybe he also borrows some stuff from inside the safe, then returning to Slackjaw and giving him the code as he takes care of the Pembletons for us, revealing that he shaved their heads, cut out their tongues and threw them into their own silver mines, just looking like any other slave quote unquote employed for them. Returning to Samuel, who then takes Emily and Corvo back to the pub as Emily is set up in a tower next to the pub for her safety. But once again, no rest for little old Corvo as he is sent out once again to weaken the Lord Regent. This time capturing his lead inventor, Anton Sokolov, who we meet at the start of the game as he is also the royal painter. But after capturing him alive and supplying him with alcohol, he gives us some information. That being that the Lord Regent has himself a mistress, but unfortunately Sokolov only ever painted her rear. The Lord Regent into some interesting things, it would seem. Not knowing her face, however knowing that she is one of the 3 Boyle sisters, and they just so happen to be holding a masquerade party, and Corvo just so happens to have a creepy mask he can wear and roam freely around the party with, whilst they're also doing a task that Lord Pembleton has sent him on, which ends up with us in a duel killing one of Lord Pembleton's rivals for him. Corvo then sneakily making his way upstairs to search for information on which one of the sisters he is after, and after making his way past a locked door and finding a note and also a key to Dunwall Tower, which I'm sure will be useful later, the sister we are after is Waverly Boyle, and luckily for Corvo there is a lord at the party who also has eyes for Waverly and not a very strong conscience, as Corvo convinces Waverly to talk alone in the basement, where he then knocks her out and supplies her unconscious body to the Lord, who then takes her away upstream, never to be seen again, as the Lord will attempt to convince her to live out her life with him, which I assume works. Maybe I'm a little unsure, however, how that is low chaos, but I'll take it. And now, finally, with his power support at an all-time low, it is now time to take it to the Lord Regent himself, which from what I remember in my previous playthroughs way back in 2014, I thought this was the last mission of the game. But as you can tell by the length of this video, it's not quite over yet, as Corvo returns to Dunwall Tower for the first time since being framed for the murder of his Empress, sneaking past all of the city watch and gaining access to the tower, where we end up in the Lord Regent's bedroom, hiding atop his bed waiting for him to enter. And after a while he shows up in his bedroom, and just as quickly as he enters his room he leaves this mortal plane, as Corvo jumps from atop the bed canopy and thrusts his blade into the Lord Regent's neck. And to add insult to misery for him, Corvo also plays his confession all over the kingdom using the Lord Regent's very own propaganda speakers. Now that the Lord Regent is dead, Corvo returns to the Hound's Pit pub for a well-earned beer with the other loyalists. After drinking his beer, however, Corvo feels unwell, returning to his bed for rest. Maybe all this assassinating has made him a bit of a lightweight. Unfortunately, that is not the case for Corvo, as he awakens in some kind of paralysed state, surrounded by Havelock, Pembleton, Martin, and most worrying, your confidant throughout the whole game, Samuel. Let's just say, Kane, I thought this game ended the last mission. This was quite a surprise to me. I did not remember this or expect it, as the next thing Corvo knows, he has been loaded into a boat as Samuel whispers to him, sending his body into the flooded district, the most abandoned part of the city, where the infected have been left to slowly die off, as is the plan for Corvo, with only gangs left behind, as a group of assassins find Corvo and take him to their leader, Dward, the man who killed the Empress, as he leaves Corvo in a cage without any of his gear. Of course, Corvo being the main character and having superpowers, he is able to get free as he hunts down his gear, and after finding all of his equipment, Corvo, at least my Corvo, goes on a bit of a killing spree, killing all the assassins that stand between him and Dward before coming face to face with the Assassin King himself, making quick work of him, all in the name of his Empress, and maybe his lover. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's my headcanon, is that Corvo's Emily's daughter, because kinda makes sense from what I'm seeing here. But anyways, there is only one thing left for Corvo to do, and that is to once again save Emily, this time from the people he thought would keep her safe. So Corvo makes his way through the flooded district and into the sewers, coming face to face with Slackjaw and an old lady. Someone who I haven't mentioned before now, but she lives near Bottle Street and doesn't like the gang at all, previously having Corvo poison their whiskey for her. She also has some form of magic that may or may not be from the Outsider, as the Outsider mentions her and warns Corvo about her, but Corvo makes quick work with her finally making his way all the way back to the Hound's Pit pub, but it is crawling with the city watch as Corvo searches for Pierre, finding them making some kind of weapon that can either kill or incapacitate all of the city watch in the area. And after helping them complete and use the weapon in incapacitation mode, Corvo searches around, finding a clue that Emily has left for him, saying that Havelock was talking about taking her to a lighthouse for safekeeping. And after signalling for the return of Samuel, Corvo makes his way to the island this lighthouse is on. The lighthouse being more of a fortress than a lighthouse, but Corvo slowly and diligently makes his way through the base. And I say slowly, and by slowly I mean I failed a lot during this segment. I don't know if it was because I was tired at this point, or maybe I'm just bad. That's quite possible. But I'd finally come face to face with the betrayer Admiral Havelock. Deciding that maybe sometimes it's okay to be a little high chaos, Corvo once again plunges his sword into his victim's throat, and this time reuniting with Emily where the game ends. As we get a bit of a flash forward as the outsider gives us a commentary on how the rest of Corvo, Emily and Dunwall's life goes, which depending on your chaos level will depend if you get the good or bad ending. But I kind of assume that both endings are made somewhat irrelevant with the release of the second game, or maybe it's just explained that the endings just being one of the many possibilities that the outsider saw for Corvo's life, which now that I think about it, that's probably how they're going to describe it, as it makes a lot of sense to me at least. But I guess I just may have to check out Dishonored 2 to see what they actually did to explain the endings. And if it's anything like this game, I think I'll enjoy it. I loved the political / royal story they were telling, and I do think it's kind of interesting to think about how a city would have dealt with the plague. That's why I like history so much. You get to learn how people with basically the same brain as you came to different decisions. As the closest we've ever had to something like that since the Black Death would have been the 2020 COVID lockdowns. And that is still literally nothing compared to the plague, as the Black Death killed somewhere between 30 to 60% of Europe's population, and all COVID-19 deaths in Europe killed only 0.28% of Europe's population, which, man, I'm so thankful for modern medicine. That would have been a crazy time. The Black Death even killed like 30% of the Middle East as well. So I can't find solid numbers for the whole world population because it's harder to tell stuff back then, but it would have been a lot. My man, I would have become even more of a shut-in than I already am. But there's way too much talk about death and numbers for one video. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. And if you want to see more, maybe even subscribe. I may even check out Dishonored 2 in the not too far future. That's already too many numbers than I already said. Anyways, only time will tell if I end up checking out Dishonored 2, so maybe subscribe to see it. If not, that's okay. I have been J104, and I'll hopefully see you around. Peace.
Into Regnum. And now Emily Caldwin the First will take her mother's throne after a season of turmoil. You will stand at her side, Corvo, guiding her young mind and protecting her from those who seek to exploit her or cause her harm. You watched and listened when other men would have shouted in rage. You held back instead of striking. So it is, with the passing of the plague and Emily's ascension, comes a golden age, brought about by your hand. And decades hence, when your hair turns white and you pass from this world, Empress Emily, Emily the Wise, at the height of her power, will lay your body down within her mother's great tomb, because you are more to her than royal protector. Farewell, Corvo.